Hey y'all, Irix Guy here, and I want to do a quick comparison of the Tudor Black Bay 58 in blue, which you can see right here. This is 39 millimeter. You can see the case thickness, very manageable case thickness. And if it looks kind of murky, it's because I've still got the stickers on. So that's why it's not shiny on the side. It does have polished. It's got a brushed bracelet and brushed, front of the lugs there, but the sides are polished. But I've got the little protective stuff on it. So here's an up close view here. It's got the snowflake hands. It's got a very nice dimensional looking dial. Sapphire crystal. You can see the sapphire crystal sticks up. This video is in 4K Ultra HD, so if you've got that resolution, crank it up. It does have faux rivets on the bracelet, which a lot of people have commented about. It's got a very nice, it does not have a glide lock type equivalent, but it's got a very nice clasp here. You can see it goes down, and then that piece right there flips down to secure it. See? So to take it off, you just do bam, and then that's a little blue protective piece on it. And you do bam here. See? Case back, very similar to a Rolex case back. Again, Tudor is developed by, or was created by Hans Willdorf, who's the same dude that created Rolex. So you're going to see a lot of similar characteristics. This watch is nowhere close to the price point of Rolex, especially nowadays because of all the perceived supply manipulation. Who knows? I'm not pointing fingers, but whatever the case may be, Rolexes are just not. They don't make sense anymore. I've had mine for like 10 years or so. But yeah, this right here, just a good color. Again, nothing shiny. It's got an aluminum bezel. So if you want something that's going to develop patina, you go swimming with it. You go in a pool, you go in a hot tub, you go in the ocean, you scratch it up, you bang it into walls by mistake. This bezel is going to scratch and it's going to show age. And a lot of people like that. That's desirable over ceramic. When we get to the Rolex in a minute, the Rolex has ceramics, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can see it's got the snowflake style hands. It doesn't have that Mercedes type logo like the Rolex does. This is rated, it is a certified chronometer, but it's rated to 200 meters, 660 feet, as you can see indicated on the dial there. So not quite the water resistance of the Submariner, which the Submariner is 1,000 feet. The bezel, again, we said the bezel insert's aluminum, but the bezel action, listen to this. I'll hold it closer to my shirt. So it's got a smooth bezel action, but there's no watch on the market today that has the bezel action of the Submariner. But again, this is very smooth. The crown, no crown guards, which gives it a more vintage type look. A lot of collectors prefer that. The crown itself is a screw down crown. Unlike the Rolex, when you unscrew it, you don't see that little rubber gasket in there. So, again, this is rated to 660 feet, but as far as the crown itself, it's very sturdy. The crown does not have as sturdy of a feel as a Submariner, though. But again, this is a completely different caliber of a different level of watch. Again, the rivets on the bracelet are fake. That's offended a lot of people, man. The good thing is, if you don't like it, you can swap the bracelet for a NATO or for a leather or whatever type of strap you want to use. But during normal wear, you're probably not even going to notice the rivets because you're going to be checking the time. You're probably not going to be holding the watch at the side and saying, hey man, there's fake rivets on there. I hate that. I hate those fake rivets. You're probably not going to do that. So, yeah, I mean, it's, again, I feel that this is inevitably a future classic. So, you know, again, if you're wanting something that has a ceramic bezel, that's going to knock you out of this because this has aluminum bezel. Don't let the 39 millimeter scare you though, because the 39 millimeter, and again, I haven't taken any of the links out, but I've got a 7.5 inch wrist. Look at how much room I've got to work with on this bracelet here. I mean, I can adjust, I can tighten this up a ton. So, you know, from the factory, this thing has plenty of, I mean, you'd have to have a super fat wrist, man. If you had a super fat wrist, this still may even fit you. But, you know, if you're like me and you've got a 7.5 inch wrist, which is kind of a, you know, it's on the larger size wrist, I guess. You know, you can see here when I'm pushing this down to simulate how it looks. This watch looks phenomenal on the 7.5 inch wrist. And again, since I do have a 7.5 inch wrist, there's plenty of room for me to resize this bracelet. So no concerns there. Really exceptionally well done piece. Now let's do what we said we're going to do in this video, and let's talk about the Tudor Black Bay 58 in blue color. Look at that. The bracelet looks nice. Again, it's a brushed stainless steel. Now it's worth mentioning the stainless steel in this Tudor is not the same type of stainless steel that's present in the Submariner. The Submariner uses a fancier, I think they call it like 90 whatever. I forget the exact number, but this is, I think, this is a 316L possibly stainless steel, and this is like a 9 whatever. Rolex does a lot of their metals and stuff in house. But before we start with the Rolex, let's do a side by side here. I want you to see. Now the Rolex, of course, is 39 millimeter. I mean the Rolex. I'm sorry, I just botched that. The Rolex is 40 millimeter. The Tudor is 39. So if you're thinking that, you know, if you're turned away from the Tudor because the fact that it's 39 millimeter, you probably want to think again. I would recommend going to an AD, an authorized dealer, trying it on, because I think once you put it on your wrist, you're really going to like it. Now you can see here the height. I mean, just holding these like this, and I don't want to scratch them up against each other, but I'll hold them close. You can see the Submariner 114060 ceramic bezel. It's got substantially taller wrist presence. The Tudor, in my professional opinion, or I shouldn't call myself professional, but in my humble opinion, man, I would say that the way the Tudor fits the wrist is more desirable. It doesn't stick up. You know, when this Tudor's bracelet is adjusted, it's going to have a very nice wrist presence. You know, less is often more. With that being said, the Rolex Submariner, in comparison to a lot of watches nowadays, because, you know, a lot of watches nowadays are going upwards of, you know, 44 millimeters. So in comparison to other watches, it may appear to be small. But I think the Tudor proportionally, and let's see if I can hold this up here side by side so you can see. So there's the side of the Tudor, and there's, let me get a good shot there. See, there's the side of the Submariner, and there's the side of the Tudor. So you can see the Tudor, not only is it significantly less tall, let me see if I get these side, if I can get them both in here so it's better. How about that? Yeah. So you can see the Tudor is not only less tall, but the Tudor, you can see that sapphire crystal. This is in 4K, so if you've got a 4K display, crank it up. You can see the sapphire crystal on the Tudor kind of sticks up. So that gives it, again, it gives it more of a vintage type look, you know, old school type look. Whereas with the Submariner, when you're looking at it from the side profile, you know, really all you're seeing is that bezel, that ceramic bezel. And, you know, I'm not trying to tell you one watch is better than the other, you know, this is just an honest comparison video. Now, you know, looking at the bracelets, one thing you're going to notice about the Submariner is that the Submariner bracelet seems to taper a little bit more. You know, gets a little bit thinner than the Tudor. So, you know, that may be more desirable for you. That may be more comfortable. But looking at the bracelets from afar, you know, not taking into account the fake rivets on the side, because obviously the Submariner has shiny sides and no, let's see, the Submariner bracelet has shiny sides and no fake rivets, whereas the Tudor has shiny sides, but it's got those fake rivets. So, but as far as the bracelet link, as far as the links of the bracelet are concerned, you know, when you look at these, when you look at this bracelet, the Tudor, and then you look at this bracelet, the Submariner, the bracelets look very similar. But again, the bracelet material, this is a lesser, and again, not that it's saying it's inferior in quality or anything, but this is a different type of stainless steel. I think this is a 316L. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Submariner, of course, is like a 9, whatever Rolex uses, you know, because Rolex does all their own metals. So that's the Tudor right there, and I'm going to set the Submariner down beside it. Again, the Submariner has an advantage with the clasp, because right here, this Submariner, the 114060, has glide lock. So see, you can take this, you can pop this out, you can slide up. So see, say I got really fat, you know, maybe I had a week where I ate a bunch of junk. See, I just adjusted that. I've added that much extra space to my Submariner's bracelet because of the glide lock. The Tudor does not have the glide lock. See, then I want to tighten it back up. All I do is pop this down, push in, and then snap back up. Now I've got it as tight as it'll go. So when I put it back on, it ought to be what is my perfect fit. And again, my perfect fit, this is all subjective. I like to be able to slide a finger in there. You know, if I can slide a finger in there, it's tight enough. You know, I don't want something that's going to twist around my wrist, make it look like I, you know, got a watch out of a gumball machine. You know, I don't want that unprofessional look. I want it to be fitted, but again, I want it to be fitted where I stick my finger in there so it's not too tight. You know, you never, most people at least, don't want to watch it so tight where it's going to leave marks. Just this for me is perfect. I do the little finger test. If I can stick my finger in there, I feel like I'm good. So, yeah, this, you know, obviously the wrist presence of the Submariner is great. The Submariner does have crown guards. This reference Submariner does. So you can see the crown guards. Those are the little pieces that go beside the crown. Some people dislike crown guards. So the fact that the Tudor has no crown guards, that makes it have more of a vintage look. That makes it more desirable in the eyes of a lot of collectors. So I think the lack of crown guards is a huge positive, will probably be a huge positive in the eyes of a lot of people. Obviously, the Tudor does not have the Rolex logo because the Tudor is not a Rolex. It's made by that Hans Willdorf dude. You know, Hans Willdorf, he developed Rolex and he developed Tudor. And, you know, not to misquote Hans Willdorf, but it was basically, you know, hey, you know, I've developed, and this is this is just my interpretation of it. This is not a quote, but it was something along the lines of, you know, he had developed Rolex, which is like the high-end watch brand. You know, the brand that people think, oh, if they got a Rolex, they think they've made it or whatever. You know, he created the excellent marketing that surrounds Rolex still today. But, you know, with Tudor, he was basically thinking, you know, hey, you know, I want something that's, you know, more affordable, more accessible, you know, a lot more affordable, a lot more accessible. And he developed Tudor. So it was, you know, Tudor was kind of the, let's just call it the poor man's Rolex. You know, it was developed to enable, you know, even people that, you know, that may not be successful to be able to get what looks like a Rolex. That's not the case with Tudor today. Tudor today is taking a, you know, completely different direction because Rolex has just, you know, unfortunately gone through the stratosphere. So, you know, unless you've had the Rolex bug since childhood like I have, you may have missed out on the opportunity to get one, unfortunately. So, But yeah, the Rolex you can see now. Let's listen to the bezel. Remember what I was saying about the bezel on the Tudor? Listen to this Rolex bezel. I'm going to lean closer to the mic. Such a smoother bezel action. Not saying that the Tudor's not, but let's do this again. We're going to do the Rolex again. So crank up your speakers. We'll do Rolex again, then we're going to do the Tudor. Okay, that was the Rolex. Now let's do the Tudor. And now let's do the Rolex again. So as silly as that may sound, any collector, most any collector out there, they're going to immediately notice the difference in sound, and not only sound, but tactile feel, manipulating the bezel on a Rolex versus a Tudor. The Tudor is very good. The Tudor's bezel action is so much better than a Breitling Super Ocean Heritage 2. The Breitling Super Ocean Heritage 2's bezel action, in my opinion, is one of the most negative aspects of the piece. Not that it's a problem, but it just doesn't. If you've handled, well, tell me a timepiece that has a better sounding and smoother tactile feel than a Rolex Submariner. You're probably not going to be able to find one. If there is, let me know, because I'd like to put my fingers on it and see what it sounds like, feels like. But, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, this has ceramic bezel. Ceramic will probably not fade. Ceramic will probably not scratch. And ceramic may not crack. I know some people that said they've cracked their ceramic bezels. I've banged into walls with this thing, and it hasn't cracked yet. So, who knows? But again, the bracelet is more tapered. It has a little, if you're buying these watches, what I feel is for the wrong reason. A lot of people buy them like, man, it's got to have that Rolex logo, dude. If you got to have that, well, there's a Rolex logo there, and then there's one on the, on the dial right there right below the 12 o'clock position. So, you're getting that. If you're not a collector, if you're just getting into this for whatever you think is status. In that scenario, only one of these watches will float your boat. The Tudor's not going to do it, because if you're in it for status, what Tudor's probably going to say, at least in your mind, Tudor's probably going to say, man, I couldn't afford a Rolex. That's probably what Tudor's going to say. Now, in the eyes of a collector, as we've just mentioned, this Tudor is going to say, well, they've gotten a lot of things right. This is a modern vintage watch. We don't have the crown guards. We've got the sapphire crystal that sticks up. We don't have the ceramic bezel. We've got this aluminum bezel that should develop patina. We do not have fake patina like the first Black Bay 58 reference had, which that's why I was never interested in it. We do have, a more manageable case size. It doesn't stick up on one's wrist like the Submariner, which the Submariner really doesn't. It's just a little bit slightly taller wrist presence. But unlike, this is so much better than the original Black Bay release that I think was either 40 or 41 millimeter, because that case height on that thing, especially the first Black Bays were ETA movements, and then the next Black Bays were in-house movements, but the in-house movements were taller case profile than the ETA movements. And then they came out with the Black Bay 58, which is perfect. So again, at the time of filming this video, this Black Bay in blue dial without any fake patina, which is what I prefer, and the Black Bay 58 in, well, again, this is Black Bay 58 blue dial, and then they've also got the Black Bay 58 with the black dial, which has the faux patina, which I don't like. Again, personal preference. But the only thing that I would say that I think most people are going to agree with, these fake rivets on this bracelet are stupid. I don't know, if you know why they were added, if Tudor, if you're watching this, man, if Hans Wildorf, if your, grandchildren or whomever are watching this, y'all tell me, why'd you put these fake rivets on there? Because I think they look stupid. But again, not a problem, because all you got to do is just tell the time on your watch, And I would say 90% of the time, you're probably not going to be looking at the side. I know with my Submariner, I seldom notice the side of the bracelet, except maybe if I've been out in salt water and I'm cleaning it. You know, I come back in, I clean it in fresh water, because I swim and get in hot tubs and stuff with all my watches. Not that it's recommended, but you know, that's why I wear tool watches, so I can do those. I can perform those activities. But yeah, the Submariner, obviously, you know, you've got some other things you may not have noticed. These lugs right here, man, this thing wears bigger. You know, even though it's only 1 millimeter larger than the Tudor Black Bay 58, it wears bigger. The case size is bigger. Now again, this is a 114060. If you look at the Submariner that Rolex just released in 2020, it's even larger. It's a 41 millimeter diameter, but the current model Submariner that was released in 2020 September, it has thinner lugs. But see, if you look at those lugs, see, take a look at the lugs there. Now look at the lugs on the Tudor Black Bay 58. See how much thinner those are. So the fact that the Submariner is 40 millimeter, that's one thing that makes the Submariner look larger on one's wrist. The other thing that makes it look larger is the fact that the lugs are wider. So, you know, let's say hypothetically that Black Bay 58 had gone 40 millimeter. If they had gone 40 millimeter but had, you know, thinner lugs like that, it would probably still wear smaller on the wrist than the Submariner. So, you know, my objective is to not try to convince you that, you know, taller or shorter is better. That's not my objective. I'm pointing out, in, you know, without any sort of bias, the differences and similarities among these pieces. I mean, these are both, again, they're, you know, Hans Willdorf, that guy that invented Rolex and Tudor, you know, he wanted similar design language, you know, between the two brands. So, you know, you can definitely see, you know, looking at the bracelet, looking at the dial, you know, the markers on the dial, you know, the shape, you know, you got like this triangle shape at 12 o'clock. You got the little circles and then the batons, and they've got lume in the middle of them. So, you know, you're seeing that similarity where the text is on the dial. You know, it's straight across. This one says, it just says the, you know, 200 meters, 660 feet, chronometer officially certified. And then on the Rolex, it says Submariner, 1,300 feet, superlative chronometer, officially certified. So they throw in that fancy word superlative in front of chronometer to try to make it sound snootier than just a chronometer. All the chronometer is something that passed a test. It's called the COSC. It's this institute over in Switzerland, and they test a movement to see if it meets or exceeds whatever requirements are required for the word chronometer to be placed on the watch. So both of these are chronometers. You know, the Tudor's a chronometer, the Submariner's a chronometer, but the difference is that, you know, this has the snobbiness of being Rolex. You know, the top of the top of the line company from Hans Willdorf. You know, it's got that snob factor, and the fact that they put superlative in front of chronometer, you know, they're just saying, well, chronometer's not good enough. You know, we got to say superlative. You know, make it sound snooty. So that's kind of what that is. Now, granted, you know, the Submariner has a Rolex in-house movement. The Tudor Black Bay 58 has a Tudor in-house movement. So, you know, you're getting a great movement in both of these. Is the Tudor movement as good as the Rolex movement? You know, I would love to be more proficient with understanding the internals of automatic watches, but I just don't have that level of knowledge currently. So, you know, I'm not going to claim that one's better than the other. I think the best thing that one would want to do if they wanted to test the timekeeping capabilities, I think Rolex is, what is it, plus minus 2 seconds per day. I think that may be it. What it would be interesting to do, you can get these things online that, you know, you can test the accuracy of a timepiece. So, you know, if you've got 2 automatic watches, you know, preferably from the same, you know, year, because you don't want one that's older, because one that's older that hasn't been serviced may not have the accuracy of a newer one. But get two different watch references. You know, get a Tudor and get a Rolex and run one of those little testers and see how accurate the tester tool indicates that each one is. Because you may find that the Rolex movement may not be any more accurate than the Tudor movement. Or you may find that the Tudor is more accurate than the Rolex. Who knows? Another thing I mentioned earlier, you can see on the Rolex, you got those hands. The hand is, it looks like a Mercedes type logo there, see on the hour hand. So that's the type look you get with the Submariner. But on the Tudor, the Tudor Black Bay 58, you don't have that Mercedes looking logo. You got what they call the snowflake. And not only do you have the snowflake on the hour hand, but you've also got a snowflake on the seconds hand. Again, both of these pieces, see how dimensional that dial looks? You can see the markers. They've got lume in the middle and they're dimensional. But what sets the Tudor aside from the Submariner, again, look at that sapphire crystal sticking up. See, it's sticking up above the bezel. When you look at the Submariner, again, those markers on the dial are elevated and they've got lume in the middle. But when you look at the Submariner from the end, you don't see the sapphire sticking up. When you look at the Submariner from the 6 o'clock position, you don't see the sapphire crystal sticking up. You just see the bezel. And again, just to re-demonstrate that, you know, looking at the Tudor from the 6 o'clock position, see, you can see that sapphire crystal sticking up. So that's an aspect of the Tudor that a lot of people find to be visually appealing. And again, at the end of the day, you know, these are just watches. They're sports watches. They're meant to be, in my opinion, they're meant to be abused and used. You know, swim with them, do whatever. You know, I mean, if you're afraid to use it like it's meant to be used, you know, don't get one. But, you know, I wanted to post this video because I wanted to show up close how different yet similar these two pieces are. Now, do I like the Tudor or the Submariner more? I mean, I always wanted a Submariner when I was little because James Bond had them, and I thought it was cool. I like James Bond. But now that I know I'm not James Bond, and I just like watches in general, and see, I haven't adjusted the Tudor's bracelet, but so you can see how that'll look once I adjust it. So there's the Tudor, and then the Submariner. So, I mean, immediately you probably notice the larger wrist presence of the Submariner. Now, I've got a goofy, like, they call that little bone right there, they call it the ulna, I think, and mine's, like, not good enough. Like, some people wear their watches above their ulna bone or whatever you call it. Mine, I just make loose enough so they can kind of slide up above, but they fall down because my bone doesn't stick out, dude. So, inevitably, I end up wearing my watches above my wrist, which a lot of people do this, but a lot of people criticize. They're like, dude, man, you're supposed to wear your watch above your bone, your wrist bone. But, you know, I just don't do that, man. I got my own style. And like I said, I've got these bracelets I fit so where I can stick my finger in there. So, I mean, I can slide this up my wrist if I want to, but inevitably it's going to fall down. And I size it to where it doesn't leave marks on my wrist. So back to the question, which one is better? And what's the advice that I would give for someone that's shopping for the Submariner or the Tudor Black Bay? What's the advice that I would give? trying to make this thing sit down here. What's the advice that I would give, man? Well, trying to get both these in the frame here for y'all. You tell there's no, this is not a, this is an authentic production. I'm not trying to put on any sort of tomfoolery or whatever you call it. So what's the best advice I would give for someone that's, wanting to get a good dive watch? Let's just say money's not an issue, because inevitably today, and again, I've had the Submariner for I think 10 plus years. So I mean, I got the Submariner when you could still find them in authorized dealers. You could still get a steep discount, and that's the only reason I've got it. And at least I was forward thinking enough to go ahead and get it. So my advice: should you buy the Tudor Black Bay or should you buy the Rolex Submariner, and why? My honest advice: if money is no issue, if you've done really well, and despite the perceived shortage of Rolex and the astronomical prices that they're charging now, if money is still no issue for you, I would go with the Rolex. The only reason I would probably do that, the value retention is probably always going to be higher. The Rolex Submariner is without a doubt the most iconic dive watch, or probably the most iconic watch in general on the market. Not just the dive watch segment, but probably the most recognizable watch in the world. For that reason, I don't think that anyone could go wrong with Submariner. With that being said, again, I'm not making this a financial discussion. I'm making this, like we already established, money for you is no issue. So which one should you get and why? So, if you could afford both of these, the Submariner, for long-term value retention, like I just said, is probably going to be your best bet. Now, that's not to say that this one's not going to appreciate. This one right here, this Tudor Black Bay 58, I feel is well positioned to become a future classic. And, the 39 millimeter, again, as we demonstrated within this video, the wrist presence, it doesn't stick as high off of your wrist as the Submariner. It has no crown guards, which again makes it have that more fitted to your wrist type look, not too tall, not too chunky. It's got the aluminum bezel instead of ceramic bezel, which obviously, the aluminum bezel is probably, going to develop patina over time. So if you're a collector, if this is a piece that you're wanting to pick up and wear and develop patina and pass down or whatever, the Tudor would probably be a better bet, because it's going to develop it's going to develop that used look. Whereas the Submariner, because of the ceramic's probably not going to fade, and probably not going to crack, the ceramic bezel on the Submariner. But of course, the watch itself is going to show signs of use. I've had this one for 10 plus years now, and I've got scratches all over the bracelet, the case. I mean, that's just what gives it personality. I mean, if you don't wear it, you don't get this. I mean, it's just, if you don't wear it, why are you buying a sports watch? Some people buy them for the wrong reasons. But, so that's another thing. The Tudor, having that aluminum bezel, that's a huge advantage in the eyes of a lot of collectors, because it is going to develop the age. Again, the fact that the sapphire crystal on the Tudor has a dome type look. It sticks up above the bezel when you're looking at it from the side or from the 6 o'clock position. It sticks up, gives it that vintage look. The bracelet on the Tudor, although comfortable and although plenty big, I mean, I've got to resize this to fit my 7.5-inch wrist because it's too big. But, although the bracelet has a nice feel to it, it doesn't have the glide lock for micro adjustments like the Submariner's does. In all sincerity, like I said, I've had this Submariner, 10 years or so. I've never used the glide lock except to demonstrate how it works. So is that a feature you would even need or want? Maybe some people use it a lot with their Submariner. and if they switched over to a Tudor, they would miss it. So, you know, that could be a pain point. The faux rivets, the fake rivets on the side of the Tudor Black Bay 50H bracelet, I don't think that's a deal breaker. Because again, I hardly notice it because I seldom look at the side of the bracelet. When you're telling the time, you're probably going to be looking at the dial of the watch or your smartphone, unfortunately. So you're probably not even going to notice the rivets are there. And if you do, I don't think the fact that rivets exist are going to be a problem. But that is something to consider. And keep in mind, you could put either of these on a NATO or a leather strap. You know, you don't have to necessarily wear a bracelet. So that's easy to address. And again, if you like the Tudor, you may prefer the more vintage look of wearing it on a NATO strap. So, you know, you may not even want to use the bracelet. But the materials of the bracelets, again, Rolex uses better steel. Is it really better, or do they just make it sound better from a marketing perspective? Who knows? But, you know, the weight, not just the size, but the weight of these two pieces, when you put them on your wrist, the Submariner is noticeably heavier. You know, it's got a heavier feel to it than the Tudor. But again, neither one of these watches are heavy. Both of them are super comfortable on the wrist. So if money was no issue, which one would I go with? Well, I would go with the Submariner just because of the possibility of value retention. And again, that's not, and again, we went into this saying that, you know, money was no issue. So which one would you get? But I would still go with the Submariner just for the fact that it's inevitably the most iconic watch in the world, probably will remain the most iconic watch, and, you know, also the value of it, it'll probably continue to appreciate. Not saying you're not going to get that with the Tudor, but, you know, if money was no issue, I would definitely go with the Rolex. If money is an issue, or, you know, or maybe you don't want the name Rolex on the watch that you're wearing, then I would definitely go with Tudor. Because there's a lot of people, and see, that's the problem. That's one of the Rolex's problems, rather, is that a lot of people have bought Rolex for the wrong reason. You know, they bought it because they think they're cool, or they think that they wear a Rolex that, you know, everything is going to just fall into their lap career-wise and whatever. You know, they assume that just because it says Rolex that it changes them as a person. And that's not the case. But a lot of people feel that way, and the problem with that is that although Rolex has created a bomb-proof and what I firmly feel is the best watch in the world, that because of the people that wear a Rolex, and most of those people that are going to wear a Rolex to just say they've got a Rolex are probably going to pick up the Submariner because that's inevitably the most recognizable watch in the world. So although you've got a lot of people that are serious collectors, people that, you know, that value the quality of the watch and the fact that it's so iconic, you've also got the large camp of people that are buying this watch, the Rolex Submariner, for the wrong reason, and it's created a negative stigma for the timepiece. So for that reason, if that sort of thing bothers you, which is understandable if it does, then you can get this Tudor, which is a stealthier option. Again, the Tudor and the Rolex were both created by Hans Willdorf. So, you know, Tudor is the poor man's Rolex. That brings up the other interesting question that one should ask themselves. You know, would you feel comfortable if you were going to buy one watch, and, you know, again, money wasn't an issue, you could buy either one of these without financial pain, which one would you buy? And if you chose the Tudor, although you were financially able to purchase the Submariner as well, if you chose the Tudor, would it bother you and make you feel like whenever you wore it that you're wearing a poor man's Rolex, even though you had the money and could have bought the Rolex instead? So there's a lot of decisions that should go through one's head, you know, before they purchase the perfect dive watch. So, you know, to To me, it doesn't matter. But, you know, if you're going to, again, I would, if money was no issue, I would definitely get the Rolex. At least get the Rolex first. And then that way you've got that. And then, you know, it's not like in your mind that you felt like you took a shortcut and got something inferior to the Rolex. The reality is that the Tudor is by no means inferior to the Rolex. It's just the perception that Rolex's excellent branding has created that has caused a lot of people to assume that if it's not Rolex, it's not a good watch. And that's not the case at all. I mean, it's, you know, but if you're in a situation where money wasn't an issue, you got the Rolex first, then you've got that, you know, you've done the Rolex thing, you're feeling good about yourself and you think that you're on another planet, then at that point, you could add other pieces like Tudor, like Breitling, like UD Snarden, you know, a lot of different brands, Panerai, you know, the list goes on of tool watches. But, you know, if you're just starting out and you've got the budget, I would definitely go with the Rolex first, and that way you've just gotten that out of the way in your mind, and you don't have to worry about it. But, you know, between these two, and again, I've been wearing this for about, now I have to look at my calendar, but I think around 10 years, the Rolex 114060. And I would not go with the Submariner with a date. You notice this, you may not have noticed, this has no date, which means there's not the cyclops sticking out. It's flat. If this was a date, you'd have that annoying little thing sticking out that, you know, magnifies the date magnifier. They call it the cyclops. And that, in the eyes of a lot of people, is not desirable, including mine. I like no date. Also, the reason I like no date is that if something messes up, here's the thing. I buy refrigerators, and I buy refrigerators with 2 ice makers, with the expectation that one of those 2 ice makers is going to fail. And that's happened with my current refrigerator. But I've got backup. When you're dealing with watches, and you're just wearing them to enjoy them, and the time, you know, the accuracy, so what if after 10 or 15 years it starts to not be as accurate? If you don't want to get it serviced, that's a choice. If you've got another complication on there, even something as simple as a date, that's something else that would have to be serviced. So the simplicity of having no date is a value add in my mind. You know, it's one less thing to fail on the watch. So that's why I prefer no date. Also with no date, you get the symmetry of the dial, and you don't get that silly cyclops in there, you know, just making it, I don't know, personal preference. But between these two, again, if budget is of no issue, budget is of no concern, I would definitely go with the Rolex at least first. If budget is of concern, ask yourself, if I get the Tudor, am I just getting it because it doesn't cost anywhere near as much as a Rolex? And if so, am I always going to feel like I'm wearing a poor man's Rolex? If that's the case, don't get it. Don't get the Tudor. Save up and wait. Problem is, when you save up and wait, because of the way that Rolex prices continue to increase annually, it's just going to get more and more expensive. So it's a tough one. You know, you just need to, you should consider all these things, because these are things that, you know, as a buyer, especially if you're a first-time nice watch buyer, you probably haven't taken these thoughts into consideration, and maybe you have. But again, money no issue, definitely go with the Rolex. If money is an issue, go with the Tudor. If you understand that you're convinced that you're not going to feel like you're wearing a poor man's Rolex, because if you are, you're always going to hate it, and you're always going to look at it. It's going to remind you that you should have saved up and gotten the Rolex. But again, once you get the Rolex, then the other watches, whether it's Tudor, Breitling, Panerai, Omega, whatever, you're not going to care, because at that point, you know, you've matured as a watch wearer. You know, you're not just wearing a watch. You understand all the different watches that are available. You understand what suits your taste, and you don't care what brand or logo or whatever's on the dial. You know, you're all about the fit, the finish, the performance, the reliability. So I hope this video helped. And again, these are both fantastic pieces. And And me, you know, being involved with watches for many years, it's easy for me to say with, you know, with complete confidence that this piece right here is exceptional. You know, I mean, it is, if the Black Bay 58 in blue does not become a future classic, then I'm going to feel like a fool, because I don't think there's any way that this watch could not become a future classic. It's just got everything right, except for those faux rivets. But again, do you even notice those faux rivets? You probably don't. But they're there, and that will always be in my mind when I slip this watch on, because, you know, you'll see them when you're putting your watch on and taking it off. But I don't think it's a, I don't think they're a deal breaker. But yeah, just, you know, great quality, great. I mean, you know, y'all are watching this video because you're you're researching the same stuff, man. So it's just, you can't go wrong with either one of these. Well, you could if you don't take into consideration what I mentioned earlier. So tell me what you think within the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe. It's youtube.com/IrixGuy. Y'all have a good day. Hey y'all, Captain IrixGuy here. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to subscribe. It's youtube.com/IrixGuy. And ring that bell icon when you do to be notified whenever I post another video. Thanks for your viewership, and y'all have a good day.